Game week has finally arrived for Duke football. The Gator Bowl coming up against Ole Miss as our Duke Blue Devils have an opportunity to win their 10th game of the year.
You are Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody. Welcome on into another episode of the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. My name is JJ Jackson. So excited to have you here with us today on Monday, December 30th, 2024. Locked On Blue Devils is your one-stop shop where we discuss everything going on in the life of Duke athletics. On today's show, super excited to have a crossover episode with Stephen Willis, the host of Locked On Ole Miss, as we get set to break down the Gator Bowl, Duke's game coming up against the Rebels on Thursday as Duke looks for their 10th win of the season. If you haven't done so already, please be sure to follow and subscribe to Locked On Blue Devils for free wherever it is that you get your podcasts. Leave us a 5-star rating and written review. You can follow us on X at LO_Blue Devils, and I'm there as well at _JJ_Jackson_. And then finally, a shout out to all of our everydayers who watch our show each and every day on YouTube. Thanks for your support. Be sure to like this video, share it with your friends, and most importantly, subscribe to our YouTube channel as we continue this climb towards 3,000 subscribers. So appreciative of your support here on Locked On Blue Devils, continuing to grow this community each and every day. Again, a really fun show due up for you today as we've got a crossover with our good friend Stephen Willis from Locked On Ole Miss. Let's get right to it.
We are in Thunderdome one last time this football season. I am joined by JJ Jackson, the host of Locked On Blue Devils. I am Stephen Willis, the host of Locked On Ole Miss. And JJ, this Gator Bowl is absolutely weird because you had a situation going into this game. Everybody just assumed that Ole Miss was going to take the Florida State route. Nobody was going to play in the game. Everybody for Ole Miss minus one player is playing the game, and Duke's going to be without two quarterbacks and potentially a running back.
It's crazy that we've gotten the spot for Duke first and foremost, though, Stephen. How about the fact they're even in a Gator Bowl? They've never had an opportunity to play in a game like this. It is so rare that Duke has 9 wins in the regular season itself. But the quarterback storyline for Duke is the biggest topic here because I was excited to see Malik Murphy try and go for a 10-win season for the Blue Devils. But here we are. It's the college football calendar. That's a whole nother conversation that I know that you've been having plenty of in the Ole Miss and SEC world, so to speak. But Duke's going to be in a spot where Henry Belin IV, who's played very limited football throughout his time in college, is going to be getting the start for Duke football.
Well, yeah, you mentioned the 10-win season and you mentioned the quarterbacks being out. Are those the two main storylines that Duke is dealing with in this game, or is there anything else?
I'd say so. I'd say just the fact that, you want to celebrate the season that is for the Duke team. Since 1941, only 4 times have they ever had 9 wins in a season. In the history of Duke football that goes over 100+ years, they have only had one 10-win season in 2013 when David Cutcliffe was at the helm. There's another Duke and Ole Miss connection for us, right? There are very few, but we got a couple out there. I think that the quarterback is not going to be who's been there every single day for Duke this season. And then just trying to finish off and celebrate the year that is. And Manny Diaz's first year as a head coach, he was able to put together a 9-3 regular season to get started with his era as the Duke football coach. Pretty crazy that we're here.
Yeah, if you want to look at the Ole Miss side of the coin, you have I guess you could say senior class, although in the age of the transfer portal, you can't really do that. But a 4-year period where Ole Miss is going for the 39th win in 4 years, which is impressive for anybody. If you were Alabama and you won 39 games in 4 years, that's an impressive feat. Jaxson Dart has 170 yards in this Gator Bowl away from basically owning every quarterbacking record that Ole Miss has, including the winningest quarterback of all time. So in a lot of ways, it will be celebrating the legacies of these players that did so much for Ole Miss football. But the other side of it is the young guys that are coming through. I have the opinion, JJ, a game like the Gator Bowl, no shade towards the Gator Bowl or anything like that, but I view it as the first game of 2025, not necessarily the last game of 2024. And so I'm going to be paying attention to like Austin Simmons, the backup quarterback for Ole Miss, who's assumed to be the starter in 2025. Will Logan Diggs. This should be a game that he has a fairly consistent role in, but he has not played all season because he was coming back from an ACL. He's likely going to get carries in this game. And some of the young wide receivers and some of the young players, I think that is a very big test for Ole Miss and something that Ole Miss fans are actually looking forward to on top of celebrating the final game with their heroes.
Yeah, it is so interesting to think about, do you celebrate? Do you look forward to what can be? Do you want to give guys playing time to kind of get an idea of what it looks like in the years to come? I mean, how often have college football teams had standout performances in the bowl game, and the next thing you know, that player's not even on your team going into the next season? So very curious if something like that could play out with both of these teams in particular. And then, Stephen, I guess before we get into just more key specifics and that sort of thing, another storyline for me when I look at this game is on the defensive side of the ball. All season long, when you're looking atop the ranks, who's leading the country, when you look at aggressive negative plays being made by your defense in that TFL category, it's Duke and Ole Miss right there at the top. And what kind of difference makers can both of these teams have, knowing that, okay, for Duke, you've got a really tough test going up against Jaxson Dart and what he's done throughout his career for Ole Miss. But on the Ole Miss side of things, you got to be licking your chops, man, that, okay, it's a quarterback who is so inexperienced, and that is where you thrive in putting pressure in the backfield.
Yeah, it should be really interesting. We'll get into the key matchups in this game, specifically the defense, in just a second when we come back.
Our show here today is brought to you by our friends at Rocket Money. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? That's definitely happened to me. I had a few subscriptions I didn't even realize I was still paying for. Rocket Money made it easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It helps bring together everything in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Rocket Money is a proud sponsor of Locked On Blue Devils.
All right, we are back in Thunderdome. JJ Jackson and Locked On Blue Devils, Stephen Willis, Locked On Ole Miss. And honestly, JJ, you talked about it before we went into the break a little bit. And the defenses of both teams, it is kind of the calling card of what's going on. And we're going to talk about paths for both teams to win the game in segment 3 and give our score predictions and all that. But you have to figure with Duke having an inexperienced third-string quarterback, that defensive unit's going to have the game plan of game plan. And I do think the matchup in this game will be the Ole Miss offense versus the Duke defense. Now, the advantage that Ole Miss and Jaxson Dart has is Ole Miss played Penn State last year in the Peach Bowl, which means that a lot of Manny Diaz's defense and what he liked to do was in that defense. Ole Miss game planned essentially against that. So there's a ready-made game plan, and Jaxson Dart had a great Peach Bowl in that thing. The difference in this game is no Quinshon Judkins, no Trey Harris in this game. But Ole Miss, at least schematically, should know how to attack what Manny Diaz likes to do defensively.
Such a good point that you make there, man. And yeah, we were about a week away from having those two worlds kind of collide, right? Because at the end of last season for Duke, it culminates with the Birmingham Bowl matchup against Troy. And that was the first time that Manny Diaz was spotted kind of in Duke gear and in the mix for Duke football. And then just a few weeks later, I can't remember exact difference in dates there that the games play out. You saw that Penn State group that had been led by Diaz all season long go up against Ole Miss. So in so many ways, they've got to be prepared for that. I think Manny Diaz is, at the time, not really knowing what to expect with if this Duke opening was going to be opened, whether or not Mike Elko was going to head off to Texas A&M. So having said that, there's preparation time that he was starting to kind of figure out, okay, how best can we attack a Lane Kiffin offense? Jaxson Dart was still the quarterback, and how you scheme it up and that sort of thing. And so for Duke, I'm really looking at players like VJ Anthony and Wesley Williams on that defensive front to make big plays and to make an impact. Because if Duke's defense can't slow down this Ole Miss offense just a bit, I'm not asking for a whole lot, but just a little bit, then Duke's going to be in big-time trouble, because it's just asking so much of a third-string quarterback to carry the heavy load on offense.
Yeah, and it's an interesting situation to think about, like the Duke offense, the way they're set up. And, we'll talk a little bit at the end of the segment about Darian Mensah and what Duke is trying to do with the quarterback position, which is, it kind of looks like they're trying to position themselves to have a little bit of staying power and not so much of a one and done, real similar to what Vanderbilt has done. But when you look at Ole Miss defensively going up against that Duke offense, where you have Suntarine Perkins, you have Princely Amon-Mielon. On the inside, you have those defensive tackles of J.J. Pegues and Walter Nolan. And yes, I realize they are going to have a pitch count, but this is a situation to where Duke absolutely, if it's 3rd and 7 or longer, it's going to be slim pickings. They almost have to be ahead of the chains every single play. Like 3rd and 3 might not be a guarantee, but you might be third. You need to try and hit 3rd and 2, 3rd and 1.
Well, and with your head coach being Lane Kiffin, I don't even know that you can count on 3 downs, right? If you're if you're the defense, you got to be prepared for all 4 downs of play, because man, it's fun to watch from the outside looking in, the life that Ole Miss fans get to live with Lane Kiffin being your head football coach, and knowing that he's not afraid to gamble in any big spot whatsoever. Going for the win at every single moment within the game itself. And so if you are the defense, make those 3rd down stops. Absolutely. But understand that might not be good enough. You might have one more defensive down coming.
Yeah, and one interesting thing was in the 2022 Texas Bowl, Ole Miss played Texas Tech. Lane Kiffin just called that game like a 9-year-old playing Madden. He was going for 4th downs on like his own 11-yard line. I mean, it was it can be maddening for Ole Miss fans. You talk about living vicariously through Ole Miss fans on the outside. It can be maddening if you're on the inside of it, man.
I can imagine, but at least you're in these big time spots and that sort of thing. If you live vicariously through the Duke side of things, you don't have many games on the football thing to be celebrating. So the fact that we're here is certainly something special.
Yeah, and I thought, and it meant a lot, and just getting off subject a little bit, I thought Duke had a real chance against Miami this year. I thought they did. And I know that game meant so much to Manny Diaz because of everything that went down at Miami, and his dad is a former mayor of that city. But I genuinely thought that Duke had a good chance in that game.
Yeah, it just swung back and forth. There were 2 different 20-0 runs. We talk about runs so often in basketball, but scoring runs where teams are able to put together a lot of scoring drives in succession. Duke had it first, then Miami takes the big lead. Duke starts to come back, and somehow, some way, Vegas always wins in all of this, Stephen, because Miami's able to cover a 20.5-point spread, and they pick up a 22-point victory for Duke. For Miami. That game was one that Duke probably still has circled when you're looking at their losses so far this season. If you're Ole Miss, the other one, if Ole Miss fans are kind of looking through the Duke schedule so far, that still stings, and it kind of shows you where Duke is at in the college football world. Why not talk about this SMU game, Stephen, right? Where Duke is playing at home, forces 6 turnovers, does not turn the football over once, and yet somehow loses that football game in overtime. They did not score a single point off of 6 turnovers. And here it is, SMU going to the ACC title game, getting their spot in the college football playoff. Just a couple of plays here and there. Duke missed a 25-yard field goal that would have won it against SMU, and the positioning within the ACC would have been all over the place. It's crazy to sit there, and I know that there are games this season for Ole Miss where they're thinking, hey, if this goes another way, we're not even talking about a Gator Bowl. Maybe we're talking about a spot in the conference title game and setting up, playoff spot.
Yeah, it's absolutely nuts to think about. Ole Miss was a missed field goal at the gun away from tying Kentucky. They got beaten overtime at LSU.
Yeah.
And then the Florida game, they got beat by 1 score, and which they ended the game interception, 3 and out. It was one of those things. But though, if you want to look at what ifs, Ole Miss is 9-3, but their losses are a combined 13 points.
Yeah, that's a pretty good spot to be in. With those games being so close, and but the ball didn't go that way for whatever reason. Now you've got this Gator Bowl matchup against Duke of all teams, and I'm excited to see how this one plays out.
So for Ole Miss fans that might not know about Duke, talk about their offense a little bit, what they like to try and do offensively, and talk about their defense. Just a brief overview of both sides of the ball.
Certainly. Yeah. For Duke on offense this whole season was led by Malik Murphy, who will not be playing at quarterback for Duke. He started his career at Texas, transfers in for his first season or his second season in college, plays for Duke this year and sets the Duke all-time single season touchdown record with 26 touchdowns. I know these numbers seem minuscule when you're looking at what Jaxson Dart has done throughout his college career. But again, this is Duke football we're talking about. So to set that touchdown record was pretty impressive for him to do. Duke really struggled running the football throughout the course of the season. They had just a few games where they won the ball because of their rushing attack. So the fact that Star Thomas has now entered the transfer portal and his status is uncertain as to whether or not he's still going to be with the team. There have been, differing reports out there. Look for Peyton Jones to get a bulk load of the carries out of the backfield there for Duke. And then I'm excited when you look at the wide receiver core that Eli Pancol and Jordan Moore are getting a chance to play one more game for the Blue Devils to start off or to end their college career. Eli Pancol, an over-the-threat deep shot guy for the Blue Devils. And then Jordan Moore is one of the best wide receivers in all of the ACC, and I would love to put him in that conversation for college football as well. And here's an interesting what if. Do not be surprised, or scenario, I should say, if there are some packages where Jordan Moore ends up playing quarterback for the Blue Devils, with Henry Belin being the third-string guy. To remind people or let Ole Miss fans be aware, 2 seasons ago, Jordan Moore was a true freshman playing quarterback for the Blue Devils. Going into the next season, he's in a quarterback competition under David Cutcliffe with Riley Leonard. Riley Leonard wins out the job. He's the Duke starting quarterback, and Jordan Moore moved full-time to that wide receiver spot. These last few weeks, as Duke is getting into bowl prep mode, there have been more looks and packages in place with the thought that maybe Jordan Moore could be an option there at quarterback for the Blue Devils in the scenario. And then defensively, to kind of give an overview there on both sides of the ball, Duke really does a nice job pressuring the quarterback. I mentioned VJ Anthony and Wesley Williams there on the front for the Blue Devils. Aaron Hall mixes things up on the interior. And then the secondary features a couple of seniors in Terry Moore and Jalen Stinson, who are ball hawks in every sort of the measure, hard-hitting safeties as well. So those are kind of the guys to be on the lookout for from the Duke side of things. And yeah, Stephen, I think for Duke fans, the Ole Miss perspective would be interesting for you to shed some light on too.
Yeah, it's a high-speed tempo offense. It's like SMU, but faster.
Yeah.
That's the way
Sure.
they really go, and they gave Penn State all kind of problems a year ago.
Sure.
Lane Kiffin uses his weapons based on what is happening. Manny Diaz likes to run a bunch of zero blitzes. He is somebody that wants to put pressure and push pressure and play in the backfield. Ole Miss used their tight end surprisingly against Penn State. So look at Daquan Wright, the Virginia Tech tight end formerly. And Caden Prescorn, who had a big day in said Peach Bowl with Jaxson Dart. Those are 2 players that you might want to watch in that game. Jordan Watkins, I should say, and Aiden Williams potentially could pop up on the outside. Ole Miss has been a predominantly passing team this year. They are normally a running team. The difference between this team and that team, last year was Quinshon Judkins. I do think Ulysses Bentley IV has a chance to bust one long during the course of this game because of the way of how aggressive that Duke's defense is. On defense, Ole Miss it's that typical Alabama style defense to where they just kind of boa constrictor you. They have two really good defensive linemen on the interior, ends that can get after the quarterback, and linebackers that can fly side to side. And they have a cornerback that I don't think anybody's thrown at him in 6 games. So the defense, they're really salty. When you make a play, celebrate it, honestly, when it comes out. If you get one over, and everybody does generally in a game, there's 3 or 4 plays, it's like, yes, we got them. That's going to happen. Celebrate it, because it's going to be difficult, because the similarities between what Manny Diaz does and what Pete Golding does is forcing explosive plays, forcing long yardage to allow those defensive ends to hunt in the backfield. And if Duke ends up in 3rd and 12, 3rd and 8, it's going to be a very, very long day for the Blue Devils.
Yeah, that makes it so worrisome, considering that the kind of major big impact plays that this Ole Miss offense can make throughout the course of the season. But to your point, you got to gamble in big spots like this. You got to do what you do best. And in some ways, I don't think these coaching staffs are going to overthink it, Stephen. Here's what I do best. Let's go out there and do it, and may the best man win.
All right, Gabe. Thanks again for watching the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. When we come back, we are going to give each team's paths to victory in this game, and of course, give our score prediction as well. Stick around. All right, we are back in Thunderdome. Stephen Willis from Locked On Ole Miss, JJ Jackson from Locked On Blue Devils. We're getting ready for a Gator Bowl on Thursday. Should be a really fun game. It's 2 defenses that they are really good at putting you in long yardage. They just are. They're tackle for loss machines. One of my favorite things that I'm rooting for in this game, by the way, JJ, is the backup quarterback if and when he gets in the game, the Austin Simmons. He's a left-handed quarterback. I want to know who Ole Miss has at right tackle to handle a defense that's aggressive. Duke is a perfect case study for if you have a right tackle, because Micah Pettis got into the portal and is going to Florida State. So it's likely going to be somebody from the left side gets moved over to the right side, and I want to see what that looks like.
Yeah, as a left-handed person myself, I love seeing left-handed quarterbacks out there competing. So just the thought of that is fun. But to your point, when you switch kind of the side of who becomes your blindside tackle in that spot, can Duke look to attack aggressively there and try and make big impact plays to force those 3rd and long spots, and hope that you don't get them into 4th and manageable, 4th and go for it opportunities there for Lane Kiffin and the offense.
All right, so let's give paths to victory. What do you think Duke's path to victory in Jacksonville is?
I certainly think for Duke, if you can limit the number of possession opportunities that Ole Miss has, you're going to feel a lot better. Less chances for them to go out there and score is going to be key for this Duke team. Also, to set that up, obviously that means you're running the ball successfully. For Duke, if they're able to run the ball, that's less pressure on somebody like Henry Belin IV, again, who has not appeared in a game so far this season. In 5 career games, he has 1 start to his belt. He's only got 275 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 INT at 56% completion. So hasn't proved to be that successful of a quarterback just yet. Again, limited opportunities, but any way that you can find a way to kind of limit the possessions that Ole Miss has, that's the biggest thing that I would circle for kind of Duke's path to victory in this. And then when you are on defense, if you can find a way or two, I think the pressure is going to be there. Again, that's what they've done all season long. But I think turnovers are going to be important. I think it's going to be killer for both of these teams to give the ball to the opposition to set yourself up in scoring spots. So those are kind of the big things for me.
Yeah, and I think it would be a situation where Manny Diaz is going to try and force those turnovers. So you're going to see more exotic stuff than you probably normally would in the game, because he knows that he has the handicap of his offense that he's playing with in this game. I think for Ole Miss to win this game, and to win this game, honestly, fairly comfortably, They need to play clean. They need to avoid those turnovers. They need to avoid the rock fight that the Ole Miss Kentucky game became. I think that is the goal of what Duke is going to try and have in this game, and that is what Kentucky did to Ole Miss in Oxford way back in September. If Ole Miss can avoid that, get rolling offensively, get a 2-score leads at any point in the game. At any point in the game, if they get a 2-score lead, they'll probably be okay. Duke wants to keep this within 1 score of a game, to where in the fourth quarter, it's a possession. Let's go down and see what happens. And Ole Miss fans are well aware what happens whenever those moments can happen. So I think Ole Miss's path to victory is just playing a clean game. Jaxson Dart gets his record. The defense plays solidly and don't give up explosives. I think they will be fine.
What's that record for Duke fan? Like, what are they looking out for there with Jaxson Dart?
170 yards.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's the number for Duke fans to be aware of then.
Yeah, because I think that most of the Ole Miss players are going to be on some kind of a pitch count.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what it is, but yeah, I think you'll be surprised if somebody goes in there and plays the full game. That just wouldn't make much sense, honestly. With like Walter Nolan, he's probably going to get 20 snaps in the game or something like that. You know, that's just the way it's working. It's about maximizing what those 20 snaps are. That's what they have to do. But I do think as the game moves on, and this is just a natural thing, if Duke can keep it close early to where those pitch counts starts expiring, I guess you could say, and then all of a sudden the younger players get in, there's going to be a little bit of a talent drop off, I think, as you're getting ready to see these young guys for the next season. So the longer Duke can stay in it, the better off it's going to be for them.
No doubt. Yeah. I mean, it would just be an ultimate gut punch if you're Duke and you look up at the scoreboard and, you know, just 7 to 10 minutes of the game have gone by and you're already down a couple of scores like that. That's got to be something where then you're looking at, well, now we're trailing. Now we've really got to throw the ball. And Henry Belin is the quarterback, right? And I mentioned another quarterback option there for the Blue Devils would be Jordan Moore coming back and playing the quarterback, but then they want him to be able to run a little bit, and it's harder to do that when you're down multiple scores. So then he's being asked to get back into the passing game and that sort of thing. So, I guess to think about it, kind of winning those first few moments, the first 2 quarters, it is a 4-quarter game after all, trying to see what you could do there at the start.
All right, so let's get into the score predictions, the final score predictions. What do you got?
Yeah, for Duke, again, I talk about the keys to victory to lay it all out. I'm worried, though, Stephen, and this kind of getting ugly for Duke. It feels that that's more likely than any other scenario. For me, the number that keeps coming in my head all week is definitely Ole Miss covering in an uncomfortable fashion as well. I'm seeing 42-17 when I look at the final score in this one. A bit of a wider margin there, but I think Ole Miss wins the Gator Bowl. First ever matchup between these two schools, first ever time Duke is playing in the Gator Bowl, but I don't think this one goes in Duke's favor. I'd say 42-17.
I'm in the same ballpark, really, right in the area. I got 38-10 in this game. And it's a situation to where, like I said, Ole Miss gets out early on this game and forces a third-string quarterback to go at that defense, and it can snowball when that happens. If you look at the lines right now, Ole Miss is favored by 14.5 points over Duke, and the over-under is at 52.5 points. When you look at that, man, that 52.5 number, you think that number, like the 38-14, that's kind of close to
it's right there.
Yeah, it's right there.
Yeah. And seeing that makes me a little bit more hesitant. But, and again, thinking about the offenses that are there, you mentioned rock fights earlier. Maybe we're destined for one of those. I would like to think that we're going to have a lot of those big explosive plays that result in putting points on the board that add up over time to getting closer to that number. So I would like to think the over is in prime position there. But again, Stephen, I can't stop thinking about you in the rock fights, man, because Manny Diaz, as a defensive guy, absolutely loves those and wants to find a way to get his team in one.
Anyway, JJ Jackson, Locked On Blue Devils, Stephen Willis, Locked On Ole Miss. JJ, thank you very much for doing this, and good luck in your travels, bud.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. And thank you to everyone for the support for not only my show with Locked On Blue Devils, but Locked On Ole Miss and everybody within the Locked On Podcast Network.